Oh, yeah, we are back. Sportsbit betting insight today, Thursday, September 8th. Paulie and Teddy. Follow us on Twitter at Paulie Howard at Teddy underscore covers. Big game breakdown. We'll preview the marquee games coming up in college football. And, of course, the play of the day. Let's start with bad beats, bad bets, bad for the books. A bad beat in the Mets-Reds game with the under 8, Teddy. The starters were fine. The bullpens blew up in the 8th inning.
Yeah, I mean, every day we talk about a bad beat on an under, and certainly last night's game, no exception to the rule. The relievers gave up more runs in the 8th, 5, than Syndergaard and DeSclafani allowed through 11 innings combined, 3, only 2 of them earned. Of course, Jose Reyes has kind of turned back the clock for the Mets. He's hitting .287 with 6 homers since returning 2 of 5 with a big home run yesterday. And the Mets, all of a sudden, just half a game behind the Giants. Giants still 17-32 since the All-Star break.
And there's another bad bet. Another bad beat. The Giants up 5-3 in the 9th. They blow it. The Rockies win with a 3 spot, and they're 5 back of the Dodgers in the West. And as you mentioned, I mean, this is slipping away. The Mets are right behind them. They've been horrible since the break.
It's one thing to be in a slump for a couple of weeks or even a month. This San Francisco slump has now gone on basically for the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks now almost. When you're that bad for that long, you're not a playoff team. And maybe the Giants will find a way to turn it around over the last couple of weeks. But it's hard to be bullish on this team when they've been such a dismal ROI for their supporters since the second half of the campaign began.
Here's a bad bet. They were betting the Orioles and Bundy, a 30-cent move. They got beat.
Yeah, Bundy's been getting bet up on the regular. And Baltimore gave Bundy an early 2-run lead, but he could not hold it. Boy, 2 starts against the Rays at the Trop this season. He's only lasted a combined 7 innings, giving up 9 runs, including 5 dingers. Heck, he's had more review for the dugout than from the mound at the Trop in Tampa.
Yeah, another bad bet. It's like a nightly occurrence here. A horrible road trip for the Blue Jays. They lose 5 out of 6. They get swept in New York. The Red Sox are now in first place in the East. Blue Jays trying to hang on to one of those wild card spots, and a 15-cent move on the Blue Jays.
Yeah, money for Toronto once again, and the Yankees beat them again. I swear we had this discussion about the Jays being a bad bet yesterday and the day before, and the day before that. Lost 2 out of 3 at Tampa, swept in the Bronx. This team needs a day off. They're getting it today, boys. Enjoy it, because the Red Sox come to town tomorrow.
Bad news for the Nationals. Strasburg came back, his first start since August 17th, Teddy. He left in the 3rd inning. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's real dicey for Washington. But what do we got? Dusty Baker in charge of an A-plus level pitching staff. What did we expect?
All right, to the NFL now. David Purdum's article, ESPN Chalk. The Browns winning the Super Bowl is the worst-case scenario entering the season. At Station Casino Sportsbook, here's a quote from the VP, Art Manteris, that they're our biggest loser, but we're not sweating it. They opened 200-1, and at CG Technology, Teddy, more people are betting on the Browns than 11 other teams.
And one of those teams, including like the Redskins, a playoff team from last year, who hasn't attracted the future book attention as the Cleveland Browns. But you say, Manteris, why is he not worried about that liability on Cleveland? Well, let's see. They have 10 rookies listed as number 1 or number 2 on the depth chart. Corey Coleman, Joe Shorbert, Emmanuel Ogba, all supposed to start as rookies. And oh, by the way, 7 more rookies are third string. They drafted 14 plus 3 rookie free agents, all made the roster. It's rebuilding time in Cleveland. It's not a time for the books to sweat on the Browns, even at 200-1.
You got that right. How about the Ravens? They gambled and won with Forsett. That worked out.
Yeah, it sure did. And when you read about why they did it, boy, A, it makes a lot of sense, and B, it makes Forsett look pretty good. It makes the locker room here look pretty good. By releasing Forsett, he didn't lose a dime. They re-signed him with the same deal, but it allowed them to keep their strong safety, Matt Elam, and their defensive tackle, Carl Davis. They kept them on the 53-man roster, and they were able to place both on injured reserve, and that's going to allow Baltimore to bring one player back from injured reserve later in the campaign. Forsett, he basically, there was a chance that he could have been picked off by another team, but apparently everyone knew the risks. John Harbaugh, quote, you have to take risks. No guts, no glory. You can't achieve anything unless you're willing to take some risks. Certainly you take calculated, smart risks, and that's what we did there. So it's a situation where, again, I thought Justin handled it exceptionally well. It was a team move on his part, and it didn't hurt him in any way, financially or otherwise. He knew what the plan was all along. I thought it was well executed, and hopefully it helps us in the end. Good move by Baltimore. Risky, but they come out the other end. And come on, Justin Forsett's not a difference maker running back at this stage of his career anyway.
Yeah, up next, big game breakdown, the college games. We'll start with Arkansas and TCU on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Hey, SportsBit viewers, why don't you tune into the MLB Odds Couple Show for today, Thursday, September 8th. Of course, NFL season is starting today, but we got just a small slate of MLB games. And in general, Mike Brenner and I are continuing to do well. The breaks, the ups and downs are coming. I'm killing it on my totals, though.
Yes, you are.
And I'll tell you, I have one game where I might go on the total 3 or 4 different ways.
Oh my
I could
God.
tell you now, but I'm not going to because I want you to watch the show. If you watch the show, you'll find out. Mike
That's
Brenner,
right.
how you feel about this
I'm
card?
feeling good about this card, and you know what? After you guys are all done with Teddy and Paulie, come on over, because I'm not kidding you. Pistol Pete is the totals king.
All right, time for big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Here's how the show's going to work during the football season. Wednesday's big game breakdown is going to be the Thursday NFL and college. Thursday's big game breakdown will be the marquee college games on Saturday. And Friday's big game breakdown will be all the NFL games. We'll go rapid fire. Game number 1, Arkansas, TCU. One thing, too, no conference games here. But there's some major regional pride issues in some games this week that might make them more important than many of the conference games these teams will play. TCU at home against Arkansas, 7.5, 58.5 the total. Usually Brett Bielema's teams are big and physical, and they pound you on the ground with the running game. They carry that reputation, but they almost lost at home to Louisiana Tech and couldn't get the running game going, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, that reputation as Arkansas being a big, physical, ground and pound football team, that may not be true for a while this season. There's only one senior in the 2 deep on the offensive line. 6 underclassmen on the 2 deep on the offensive line. And look, last year, Arkansas, a great road team, 4-0 against the spread on the highway. That included outright wins at Tennessee, Ole Miss, and LSU. Well, that was last year. As you mentioned, only 108 yards rushing versus Louisiana Tech at home last week. They were lucky to win the game, life and death, against a bet against Skip Holtz squad. And it's going to get a whole lot tougher for this young offensive line on the road this weekend.
Patterson's been dynamite at home covering the spread, 11-2 ATS the last 2 years. Kenny Hill, the new quarterback, the transfer from A&M. They moved the ball at will and scored a ton of points last week, but they couldn't stop South Dakota State. Come on.
Yeah, and again, Trill. Kenny Hill, too. It's Trill back at A&M. Love this guy. 2 early interceptions. And then he threw for 439 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran for 45 and 3 touchdowns. So this is a quarterback who can run the offense almost the same way as Trevon Boykin. So it's not like they had to dramatically alter their playbook from last year when they had an NFL caliber QB. And as you mentioned, TCU rolling at home. You said 11-2 against the spread over the last 2 years at home. Remember, one of the 2 losses came as minus 46-point favorites against Kansas the week after their undefeated season was snapped last year. No team in the country could have covered 46 that day. Let's not forget, with TCU at home against an SEC foe, and you mentioned it at the top, Paulie, these are regional rivalries. What does it matter? It matters for recruiting. It matters for the future of the programs that are recruiting against one another. And I'll tell you this, Gary Patterson will not hesitate to punch in another TD or 2 if he has the chance late against an SEC foe.
All excellent points. The only way I could look would be TCU in this one. Game number 2, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Penn State and Pittsburgh. Pitt 5.5, 48 the total, the return of the grudge match rivalry. Both teams have question marks on offense, lack of weapons, but the best story so far, week 1, James Conner comes back. He returns from Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah, he came back, but didn't come back as the same guy. This is a guy in 2014. He ran for 765 yards and 26 touchdowns. He was the ACC Player of the Year, and you know me, Paulie, I never give running backs credit. This kid deserved a whole lot of that credit. He deserved it. He was a beast in 2014. Then he gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, didn't play last year. So the opener against Villanova. You say, all right, he's back. Yeah, he's back on the field. Only 53 yards on 17 carries, no carry longer than 9 yards, and no burst whatsoever. Now, typical injuries have treatment patterns. This was kind of a full body injury. May take a while for this impressive young running back Connor to get going for Pitt this season. I'm not convinced he's going to be able to be an impact player in this ballgame.
Well, hey, listen, Penn State struggled on offense last week. Franklin's feeling the heat. He's 0-8 ATS on the road since he took over at Penn State, and now maybe he wants to go up-tempo with McSorley, who is his quarterback. He doesn't bring a lot to the table, though.
No, I mean, look, Franklin never designed a good offense at Vanderbilt. They always had a great defense. They played hard. Their offense was never any good. He's had NFL-caliber talent at quarterback since he's gotten at Penn State. Their offense has never been any good. So the fact that they only had 354 yards versus a bad Kent State's not a mediocre MAC team. They're towards the bottom of the MAC. 354 yards. The offense never found a rhythm in that game. They only had one TD all day until they got a meaningless touchdown with a $1:53 remaining, less than 2 minutes remaining. It's not a Penn State team that has the type of skill position talent that's making opponents sweat at night. It's just not that Penn State. And as you mentioned, 0-8 against the spread under Franklin on the highway. And they even went 0-2 on a neutral last year. Lost by 17 or more at Temple, Ohio State, and Sparty. That was 3 of their 4 road games.
How about Virginia Tech and Tennessee? Tennessee 11.5, 54.5 the total from Bristol Motor Speedway. They're expecting 160,000 people. Officials from the Guinness World Records will be on hand to authenticate the mark. 40,000 seats allotted for each school with the special student section as well. And you look at this picture, Teddy, there's going to be a lot of people who have a horrible view of the actual field.
It's a really weird venue and a lot of really bad seats and a lot of extra room between the field and the stands in this ballgame. But, I don't know that the venue is necessarily going to affect things all that much. It's going to mean the crowd noise is probably a little bit less than it is for an average game. But it's a neutral site game anyway. As you mentioned, both teams bring 40,000 fans. The question I have, though, is Virginia Tech quarterback Jared Evans ready for the pressure? Because this is, it was a great story. He claimed to a Roanoke paper that the biggest crowd he played of in his JUCO was 250 people and thought he was kidding. And they looked it up and they realized the biggest crowd he played in in front of as a JUCO was 250 people. This quote stood out to me, and it made me, it's a one-way quote for me. When you read this, you don't bet Virginia Tech. This is from Evans. He was asked about, can you handle the pressure? He goes, no, I'm worried about making sure I learn the million new plays that we got. That's not exactly a bet on quote from a QB that is, hasn't been in anywhere near this type of pressure situation before. And of course, Justin Fuente got an interesting question here because he's got to recruit.
I was going to ask you.
Ask me.
Yeah, I was going to ask you 2 things. One, do you panic because Tennessee was so bad against App State and they were lucky to win? And number 2, if you're Fuente, do you go fast and up-tempo to show off for your recruits and the guys you're trying to get, or do you just let Foster do his thing on defense and try to grind out make it a close game as you're a huge underdog?
What would I do, or what's Fuente going to do? Because it doesn't matter what I was going to do. I believe Fuente is going to play at his pace.
Okay.
When you read the nuance of what he's saying at Virginia Tech, he's not worried about taking some beatings. What he's worried about is getting his team into his offense and starting to recruit to that offense because Virginia Tech doesn't have that type of skill position talent right now. So I would expect them to play fast. Now, the defense that Virginia Tech has is something that's a problem for Josh Dobbs and the Vols. I mean, you talked about Appalachian State and the troubles they had last week. I thought it was every bit as much App State looking good as Tennessee looking bad, but they had to fight for everything they got versus that team, Paulie.
Mm-hmm. They had no business winning the game. They needed a missed 42-yard field goal and an extra point. App State should have beat them. And they also
they got a freshman and a sophomore starting at the 2 tackle spots, and it showed. And now, even more pressure on their pass blocking this week against those Bud Foster blitzes from Virginia Tech.
Be a great atmosphere for that one Saturday night. Up next, the Holy War, BYU and Utah. and Washington State on the Smurf turf against Boise, plus the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
So we're giving you picks every day, and you're probably making your own as well. Be sure to participate in SBR's weekly Twitter Bankroll Challenge. Just post your picks on Twitter with @SBRSportsPicks and the hashtag BetSBR before 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every day, Monday through Friday. We'll be betting your picks, and if the bankroll is positive at the end of the week, you could win the profits. Picks must be of events taking place that day and available in at least one of the major sportsbooks shown in our Best Sportsbooks page.
Back on SportsBit, Paulie and Teddy, big game breakdown continues. How about the Holy War? BYU at Utah. Utah 3.5, 45 the total. The Utes have won 5 in a row in this series, including 35-28 last year here in Vegas in December in the bowl game. It was 35-0 Utah in the first quarter, Teddy. BYU kept turning it over.
Yeah, it was one of those first quarter disasters for BYU. And they came back and made a game of it. But when you're down 35-0 in the first against your biggest rival, yeah, that's kind of frustrating. And the 5th straight loss in that series, yeah, that's kind of frustrating for BYU as well. But it's a different BYU team now than it was last December. And it's not just talking about the head coach. You have Taysom Hill all the way back at quarterback. He looks all the way back. And Jamal Williams, who was an absolute monster in the backfield for this squad, looks to be all the way back at running back here. Hill, 21 of 29 for 202 yards and touchdowns against Arizona. He also ran for 37, showed a little mobility. And Williams, this is the key, 29 for 162. And he also had a pair of long runs called back because of penalties.
Teddy, I like the under here, and some great quotes before the season from Ty Detmer, who's a new offensive coordinator, saying we're going to go slow, we're going to huddle, and we're getting rid of this go fast up tempo. We want to take our time. What happened in their first game? That total was in the 60s against Arizona. It was 9-3 in the fourth quarter, Teddy.
Yeah, of course, there was a late little flurry. But, you know, if you like the under, certainly when you look at Kyle Whittingham right now, it's a situation where there's not a lot of skill position talent. There really isn't. Their offense was inconsistent in their opener, a real grinder, 24-0 against Southern Utah. That game was 3-0 with 5 minutes left in the second quarter. The JUCO transfer Troy Williams got the start at quarterback. Running back Troy McCormick or Joe Williams, neither one showed a whole lot of boost. This is a 10-win team last year, a 9-win team in 2014. But before that, Paulie, they went 5-7 in 2012 and 5-7 in 2013. And this team feels more like those 5-7 Utah teams than it does than the 9-10 win Utah teams over the last 2 seasons.
I'll agree with that. Is the wrong team favored?
I'm interested in the BYU. It can be BYU or nothing. But, I mean, for all the success that BYU had at Arizona last week, they almost let that one get away. They've had a history of doing that in recent, some wild finishes for BYU last year at the start of the campaign. And I wouldn't be surprised if this one has a wild finish type of ball game as well.
All right, one more. They're looking forward to this one Saturday night on ESPN. Live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Washington State at Boise on the Smurf turf. Boise 10.5, 74 the total. Mike Leach losing outright as a favorite. Not big news, but nobody's better at rallying the troops and us against the world. This guy's been great as a dog on the road.
Oh, you're not kidding. You know, and I mean, Leach losing as a favorite, it feels like he almost doesn't get his creative juices flowing for those type of games. But when he's got to step it up and he gets to do us against the world, this is a very creative head coach, a very creative play caller, and he inspires players well for those settings. Look at this. Since his first season at Wazoo, 12-3 against the spread as a road dog, and that includes outright upsets, outright wins at places like, I don't know, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Utah, Arizona, Cal. They've been winning in venues like this, and they've been doing it on a consistent basis.
Well, they have a bad defense, though, and they were shredded by Eastern Washington. And Brett Rippon led up Lafayette last week in their big 45-10 win, 350 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Lafayette fired their defensive coordinator after the game, Teddy, after 1 week.
Maybe he should have. It was not a good defensive game plan for Lala. Louisiana Lafayette, that's just my little nickname for him. I always call him Lala from back in the day. But to make a short story long, the question is not about Boise's offense. Boise's going to get points. The question is about Boise's defense. Can this team get enough stops to cover? Because you look at the team weaknesses. The defensive line lost all 4 starters from last year. The secondary lost 2 first-team All-Mountain West defensive backs. And against a team like Washington State, those are probably the worst places to suffer losses on the defensive side of the football. Pass rush is question mark. Secondary is question mark. Washington State's going to throw the ball around. And Boise would like to have both of those areas in better position than they do heading into this matchup.
Which leads us to Money Time, play of the day. Betting number 385, Washington State plus the points. This line is outrageous. This is not the same great Boise team with that dynamite home field advantage they enjoyed under Peterson. They've lost a lot of home games the last few years, and teams don't have any problems going in there and beating them. And now you're giving us 10.5, Teddy?
Yeah, I mean, this is a late-night bailout special on ESPN2. Starts at 7:15 Pacific. It'll end sometime, I don't know, around midnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
3 a.m. on the East Coast. But I'm not convinced that Boise has the pass rush or the depth in the secondary to stand up to Luke Falk for 4 quarters. I say Wazoo scores enough to hang within the number. Take Washington State plus 10.5. That, my friends, is our play of the day.
6-2 so far in football. Yesterday was the Louisville-Syracuse game over. And tonight, here it is with Washington State. We're back tomorrow, NFL preview, and we'll recap what happens in the NFL opener with the Super Bowl rematch. We'll talk to you Friday on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.